Yeah, okay, good. We have 4. We can move on. All right, ready, Superintendent?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Flores, are we ready?
Yeah.
We're ready.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Flores. All right, welcome back. We are on item 4.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
I have none, Madam Vice President, but the superintendent does.
Thank you. Board members and community members, I'm pleased to announce today that the board, by a unanimous vote with board member Jesse Ryan absent, approved the appointment of Mr. Adrian Vargas as our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Congratulations, Mr. Vargas.
Congratulations. Thank you, Superintendent. No other announcements, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, item 5.0, board workshop strategic plan and other initiatives. 5.1, youth development 2021 expanded learning contracts. Ms. Ramos?
Member Pritchett, really quickly, I have a broadcast statement. I don't know if I'm supposed to read that.
You can, but
It wasn't on the agenda. Do you,
no. And it is a special board meeting. So generally the announcements are only in regular board meetings.
Okay.
Hey, good evening, board members. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hoosher and to Manpreet, who have more details on this contract. Doug, do you want to start first, or?
Yeah, and thank you, Rose. I'm going to turn it right on over to Manpreet, who's going to be making the main presentation tonight. So Manpreet, you're on.
As we're transitioning board members and community members, I do want to just remind our community that this is a board meeting that we are holding because this is an item that was pulled out of consent at the last board meeting, and we needed to make sure that we brought this back to the board. So just a reminder to our community why we're addressing this issue today. Go ahead, Ms. Kaur.
Thank you. Respected board members and dear superintendent, I'm Manpreet, Director of Youth Development Support Services. Next slide. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our department, who we are as Youth Development. We are basically a grant-funded department. Our 90% of our funds are grants. So we get $9.5 million in grant funds. We also receive some funds from Title IV, Title VI, which is American Indian Education, Title I, and some LCFF funds. When we combine all these funds, our total funding comes somewhere around 10.75, which tells you that 90% or above is grants. We coordinate after school enrichment and safety, which is a state grant, after school safety enrichment for teens, which is a federal grant. We have a Kids Code grant, and we also have Building Healthy Community grant, which is very, very small funds. We coordinate before school, after school, summer programs. During summertime, when we run programs, we run in collaboration with the academics. And after school programs at high schools and middle schools, we also collaborate with our certificated staff at the school sites, because we have a large number of teachers who teach in after school programs in 7th period and 0 periods. We also run leadership programs such as Student Advisory Council, and we are very proud of them. You must have seen their newsletter, which is a new initiative that started this year. We also run men and women's leadership programs, where we have some agency providers or our teachers teaching leadership programming during the daytime and after school. We also have Source Media Agency, and they do campaigns, student-led campaigns, Be Here campaign, you must have heard about them, and they put PSAs and stuff for a whole district. Coordinate work provided by supplemental providers. With the Title IV, as I mentioned at the top, we do have some small providers. Some of the supplemental providers, they do specific programming during the regular day and also during after school. Some of these providers are Cracker Arts Museum, Clara Academy, Sacramento Theater Company, people reaching out. You must have heard their names, and they all work in after-school programs, and some of them provide services during daytime too. And the last one, I very proudly say that ethnic studies, which has become a graduation requirement for all of our high school students, is an initiative that started in youth development in 2016. And from this year, it has become a requirement for all of our high school students. And very proudly, I say that this is housed in youth development. And we work with the academics because now it's a requirement, but it is housed in our department, and one of the specialists oversee this programming. And I'm going to also talk about Title VI a little bit. We provide services to all the American Indian students who fill out 506 form throughout the district. Next slide, please. So now I want to go a little bit in how we select community-based organizations. Community-based organizations are selected. We have two phases. First one is called request for qualifications. When we do request for qualifications, when this application opens, everything happens under the guidance of Contracts Office. Contracts Office, they approve our application. They post it on the website. They post it, send it to Sacramento Bee. It's always published in their business section. And then we do bidders conference. Anybody who is interested is supposed to come to bidders conference. Contracts Office sit in our meeting in the bidders conference. When we receive the application, they come directly to the Contracts Office, and then they forward those applications to us. Each application is read by 3 readers. And then once we have the score, then we check their references, we call them, we interview them, and then we send our recommendations to Contracts Office, whether we are going to have somebody on our qualified providers list or not. Even if somebody is not going to be on our qualified providers list, Contracts Office inform them that their application is not accepted. At the same time, I also want to say, being on the list of the qualified providers doesn't mean that you will be given a contract, because that being on the list does not qualify you to have a contract. So now is the second phase, request for school site proposal. Whenever we get a new grant, or whenever a principal school administrator feels that I would like to change my provider, they let us know. 2 years ago, we received 2 new grants for 2 elementary sites. Last year, one principal asked us in spring 2020 that they would like to change their provider. So at that time, we open request for school site proposal. Now, this proposal application only goes to those providers who are on our list, because we have checked their references. We know they have all their T's crossed, I's dotted. So those are the ones who are going to receive this application. Then they fill out the application, they turn in their application. All applications go to the principals. Then we ask the principals to have a panel ready for the interviews. We always ask them to have a certificated staff, a classified staff, a plant manager or the custodian, and one person from the office and a parent. They get their panel ready, they get their questions ready. Youth development schedule the interviews. We facilitate the interview, but youth development do not participate in the decision-making process. We never say, pick this one. We always ask our principals to send us in writing which agency they are selecting. And it's always a written email that tells us that I am selecting this provider. Principals check with other principals. They sometimes visit their programs too. I have seen principals doing site visits. And once we have their recommendation, which agency they are selecting, at that time, we move on to sign the contract with the agency based on the contract amount that the school site is funded for, the grant amount. At this point, we have 9 community-based organizations, and they provide services at 60 sites. Out of these 60 sites, there are 3 that are independent charters, and there are 57 that are SCUSD school sites. And at this point, very respectfully, I ask the board to approve our contracts. Any questions?
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one public comment from Amanda Connolly, and she says, "Thank you for trying to support our students. It doesn't substitute the in-class experience, but joining in put a smile on my daughter's face, so thank you." And that's the only public comment on this item.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Connolly. All right. Do we have any board member comment? Member Minnick?
Yeah, I just want to, it's not really a question or anything. I just want to say how much we appreciate the work that's being done for these learning hubs. And I heard from the superintendent earlier today about just, he sounded so excited about how well things are going. And then to hear that comment that, it makes a big difference for individual kids. And so I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn, how we can do this really well, so that when we do have that opportunity to expand to the greater school communities, it's going to be really great. So I really appreciate all the work that you're putting into it. So I'm very excited that we're able to move forward and have all these great organizations provide the support we need at a time where we really have kids that need it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Morosky?
I don't know. Member Vang was first, I think. But
Oh, I thought I saw your hand up first. Go ahead, Member Vang.
Yeah, that's okay. I can go after Member Borowski.
okay, thank you. I wanted to, I guess, just get a clarification on how these contracts overlap with or interact with the learning hubs that have been opened already, and also understand more about how, because of COVID and because everything is so different this year, how your process for how you modified the scope of work for the contracts, and also the funding that was provided through each of the sites.
So first question, I'm going to answer how we modify the work. So during summertime or in August, we asked all agencies to give us their proposals, how they will be providing the services. Not only that, we asked all of the agencies to contact their individual school sites and principals, how they will be collaborating. So how are they collaborating? If you see after each contract, you will see that agency's proposal. So one example I'm going to give you is providing one-on-one services, tutoring services. They are also in the Google, and very proudly I say that they are collaborating with our certificated staff in Google Classrooms, and the teachers are they are helping teachers with when they are doing assessments or small group instructions at a lot of sites, not at all sites the same thing, but some sites wherever the principal have made arrangements with the teachers, and teachers have opened their door for, Google Classroom doors for this staff. And they also provide enrichment during after school hours. They are providing like some kind of dance class. They are all taking attendance in Infinite Campus, just like the regular school year, how many students they are serving. Also, I want to tell you that during the first week when the programs, when schools were going to start, they all helped with their principals with the deliveries. They are helping even now their principals with making phone calls. Some of them did home visits too. If there is a language issue and they speak the other language, they are helping. One of the guidance from CDE is that expanded learning's objective is to engage the students who are most vulnerable and are not engaging in distance learning. And that's what our staff is doing, engaging those students. And I think your second question was how it will be overlapping learning hubs that are starting now. So I want to remind the board that when these contracts were being written, learning hubs were not at that time. We were not planning learning hubs at that time. So how are they overlapping now? All agencies, when we pick a site, like these 6 sites we selected, started on October 8, I contacted those agencies. I asked them, I said, and one thing also I want to remind the board, expanded learning grants, they only pay for maximum 4 hours of service during after school hours. Now, when we are opening learning hubs, we are asking the agencies to provide staff at least for 7 hours because it's 8 to 2, half hour before, half hour after. And we are providing them to 10 to 1 ratio staff. We are asking them to give us extra staff because each kid need to be escorted to the bathroom, screening. So at that time, I asked the agency to give us a budget. And then they subtracted, I asked them to subtract the amount that's already written in the contract. So whatever the above, and hypothetically, if the budget is 198,000, then subtract your grant amount for that site that's written in your contract. Now, whatever is left, 30,000, 40,000, that I have put the request to our CBO, Rose Ramos, and asked her to get it approved from the county, from the CARES dollars. And I do want to mention over here that all those 6 learning hubs, those extra funds, which was like 40 to 50,000, has been approved by the county.
Thank you. Member Bain.
Thank you, Member Pritchett. First, I just wanted to say thank you, Manpreet, and to the Youth Development Department. I think I echo the same sentiment as Member Minnick about just the incredible work that y'all are doing to change lives. I also want to give a shout out to our amazing, incredible community partners who I know fill an incredible a need and void in terms of serving our most vulnerable students, especially now during COVID, when we know that the needs are very dire. I did have one question and also just some concerns, just on one item in particular, because I know that we're voting on all of these contracts tonight. And in light of just some concerns that been brought to me from community members, before we take and vote on this item, I was wondering if it's possible, I'd like to make a motion to see if we could remove one of the contracts, particularly the contract for fathers and families, because I'd like to vote on these contracts separately. I have issues with one contract only because of some of the issues that have been raised by community members. And I wanted to see if this is possible because I know we're going to vote on it tonight, but I'd like to make a motion to remove this item for it to be voted separately from the other contracts. And then one question that I did have, and thank you so much for sharing the CBO selection process, is do we have a selection process in place that kind of ensures that the district, when we're selecting contracts, that there's no conflict of interest? Do we do that with any of our contracts? I'm curious.
So we have our processes and procedures put in place just to make sure that we work with integrity and our students' interests are at the forefront. So all of our procedures that I described in my presentation are under the guidance of Contracts Office. And then the second part, which is school site proposal, they are always with the direct from the principal and the selection of the panel. Now, with that being said, what happens outside the 4 walls of Sarna Center or in the people's personal life, I have no control. I have been told by our, I always ask our in-house counsel whenever there is any legal matters, and I always look towards them for guidance. And even in this matter, I have been told that there is, they have given me the answer, and I believe them. If you have any questions regarding other than this, I would definitely ask that our in-house counsel respond to that.
Yeah, no, I think that would be great. I guess the only reason why I'm also not asking our legal counsel is also because our legal counsel sits on the board of one of the nonprofits. And so I think for me, just in terms of internal protocols, I just want to know what we have in terms of processes to make sure that as we're approving any contracts or that they're coming in, that we're doing everything we can to make sure that there is not even a perceived conflict of interest. I think that's very important, for our families, our communities, and for the public. So I would actually still like to make a motion, if possible, to just remove this contract in particular so that it could be voted separately from the other contracts. And again, thank you so much, Manpreet and the Youth Development, for your incredible job, and just a shout out to all our amazing organization for doing this hard work.
Thank you.
So just so I understand, Member Vang, you're asking for a motion to remove this one contract, which will...
Yes, actually, I'm asking for it to be removed, to be voted separately. So making a motion to remove this item to be voted separately, and that's on the motion. That motion is on the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Member Garcia, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, my kids were in the room, so it's always a distraction. So I did have some questions. So if you can indulge me. So the contracts are generally, I think, for 1 year, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and this is something that I've been, I think I've asked before, because I just need to understand sort of how do we evaluate the value of our contracts, right? In terms of the services that are being provided to the students, and how do we know that certain vendors or certain CBOs are just the right fit for our district?
So thank you for asking the question. So we do it two ways, quantitative and then qualitative too. So first, I do want to let you know that we have always been worked very closely with our evaluation and assessment team. We always provide them the information. All of our CBOs are required to use our students' attendance system, where they take attendance in Infinite Campus. So we have easy access to all the information. So that's one. And we have done studies in the past. I still remember in 2017, we did a study, and then it came that students who attend after school and who are in our after school expanded learning programs have attended school more than the ones who at a higher rate who are not in after school, and they have less behavior issues, less referrals. So we have done those studies, and we are always engaged in those studies. For the last 2 years, not in spring 2020, but the previous 2 years, because in spring 2020, we were under shutdown, we have done California Healthy Kids Survey, which is the after school module. And we do that every site. Sometime numbers at some sites, students participate a lot, sometimes participation is less, because of the surveys being voluntary. So we have done that for the previous 2 years, not this last one. We always engage with the CDE's evaluation that they have put together. We participate in that. Even for learning hubs, we are engaged with our assessment and evaluation and accountability office to determine the success of learning hubs. So I hope this answers your question. And not only that, I also want to talk about how we collect qualitative data. We have a team of 4 specialists, each 60 sites, each of them roughly have 14 to 15 school sites. They regularly visit those sites. Even now online, sometimes they go in Google Classrooms just to observe them, what is happening. During the regular school year, they go site to site and then they observe if everything that we have put in place is working. We do parent surveys. During summertime, we always do a survey that parents have to answer while sitting with their child. So, and we have results from those surveys from the past. Our specialist team, they check with principals, they check with teachers. We always hear from them. We work with the school site administrative team to see, we see and observe ourselves. And I also want to remind that one of the main objective of these expanded learning grants is to provide safe and supportive environment. And we make sure that our after school, before school expanded learning do provide safe and supportive environment. And that's what we do when we visit these sites. And we have a team of 4 specialists.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that there's that feedback loop, right? Because often there's a lot of money attached to these contracts. So it's just making sure that the students are getting the services that they need and the help, and that we're constantly looking at that feedback to ensure that these particular maybe CBOs stay on the list. Or I would imagine that over the years, some of them fall off the list, right? Because of the feedback, right? So thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me. And so I have a couple more questions. So one goes back to a question that Board Member Morawski asked related to sort of the scope of services and how that essentially determines the level of grant funding. So given that we're dealing in a totally different world right now, because we're seeing in some respect in-person services being scaled back, but then also finding alternative ways of delivering the services, right? And I saw that many of the contracts have a distance or virtual learning way of delivering the services. So just wondering if on the one hand, I would imagine that intuitively you would think that there's some cost savings with that, associated with that, and maybe, but also conversely, there could be an increase in cost associated with that. Maybe you're able to expand in terms of how many students you can serve. So I'm mostly interested in hearing sort of if from prior years, because we're in this new environment, if we're seeing some of those costs go above what the normal grant usually is, and how are we paying for that, right? And I think I heard you say maybe for the hubs, I don't know if it's for others too, that we're using some of those CARE dollars that we need to use before December 30th. So I think that's sort of where I'm going with this, that there's confirmation that we're really tapping into those dollars that we need to spend, otherwise we lose. So did you, I don't know if you want to verbalize that.
So I'm going to see if I'm answering your question, and let me know if I'm not answering your question, but to my understanding, your question was, what happens when the cost go up in the past? We never let the cost go up. We are upfront with the agencies. This is how much we have. This is how much we grants are, because we are a grant funded department. Cost going up is not even an option. Now, your second question was, I think you did ask me about how we have handled it in the past to compensate for the services. But in the past, when we lost grants or anything, contracts are reduced. It happened only 1 year when we lost our funding. At that time, district pitched in and helped us with to make sure that our services continue. I think that happened during 2017. After that, we again got our grants back, and we did not need that much money from the central funds because we received our grants back. Now you're asking now about how to, as far as funding for the CARES dollars. We are only asking for CARES dollars because now we are opening learning hubs. If we are not learning hubs, if we will not have to open learning hubs, then we won't be asking for CARES dollars. So we are asking only for those dollars, because we are going to open learning hubs, which is for longer hours. And not only that, we are asking for more staff, 10-to-1 ratio, and providing 1-to-1 services to students. So that is why we are asking for this.
Okay, so they're limited to the learning hubs, the expenditures of the CARES dollars. Okay.
Yes, you are correct. Okay. Those expenditures are connected to learning hubs and limited to learning hubs.
Okay, and then just 2 more questions. One, the calendar of when, just being on the board for the last maybe couple of years, we do get in the consent agenda, contracts that we approve sort of like as a whole. But I'm just trying to understand sort of what the calendar looks like for on your end in terms of when do you start looking whether or not certain contracts will be renewed. And the example that comes to mind for me is, for example, the SRO contract, that because there was no board action taken, it automatically sort of just kind of transfers over to the following year, and then the services are still being delivered based on the last contract, right? So I'm just trying to reconcile your calendar versus what's happening on the ground. And then in some of these contracts, we have to sort of pay, like back pay, right? Because the services have already been delivered, you know, based on an earlier, you know, I guess they were being delivered prior to the contract having final approval from the board. So can you just like walk a little bit on that calendar on your end?
So whenever spring comes, like this last spring, we always do some kind of survey, check-in with the principals saying that, hey, are we good to go in the next school year? Like, as I mentioned, one principal did ask for the agency change, and we did the school site proposal. So but before June 14 or before our school district calendar year is closed, we know which agency is going to be at which site. At that time, we know, because we have already done the process. We start negotiating, talking to our agency, giving them feedback. And I also want to say we always give feedback twice, one mid-year and one at the end when we are negotiating contracts for the next year. We do that in summertime. This summer, I know which you are pointing out to the summer programming that we did with the city's grant for those 5 sites. One agency did provide. We had to put that program very quickly. And I want to let the board know that we youth development has tremendous amount of respect for your authority. And we know that we have to take authority from you to implement these contracts. So that is the one contract. It has never happened in the past, but because we had to do that in a very short span of time, and I'm thankful to the agency too, that who agreed to provide those services. Now, again, because of COVID, we were talking to the agencies. These contracts sometimes come to the board late because of the award letters. It depends on the award letters. When we receive them from CDE, board have to approve the award letters first and then approve the contracts. This year, I think award letters came on time, and I take full responsibility because it took me time to talk to agencies, hey, talk to principal, how you will be helping the site. So Mike, what I'm trying to say is by spring, we know which agency is going to be at which site. Summer contracts in the past, we have always done separate, and we have gotten approval from the board. And by August 31st, before the school year start, we bring the contracts to the board, depending on the condition, whether we already have received the award letters or not.
Okay, but in those cases, the services have not been provided because...
So the thing is, all these grants, they require us to start our services from the day one of the school site.
Got it. So there's always a gap between, a natural gap between when the school starts versus when you get the award letter, and then you bring the final contract to the board.
And it has been many times when I have seen award letters coming little late, but we are supposed to provide services for 180 days, or the number of the days equal to the district is open.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate it. It's been something that's been in my head every time I see contracts. I'm like, but this is for services backdated to an earlier date. So that makes sense. And then my final question, it's going to what board member Vang brought up, because we did hear this in public comment, I think, at one of the last board meetings. I don't recall exactly which one, relative to the conflict of interest and one of our contracts. So I don't know if who is the appropriate person on this in this meeting. I don't know if it's district council. If they you can maybe if you can just essentially provide us with an answer for this, and then if board member Bang still wants to, keep her motion on the table, then we can go back to that. So.
Sure, board member. So the question you're asking is regarding whether there's a conflict of interest, or what exactly is the question posed here?
Yeah, so I think the issue is that there may be one contract in the packet that that's before us today that may have a conflict of interest because of members of the board and then essentially employees of the district. And so I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on maybe, we heard a little bit more on we heard a bit on the process in terms of how that is mitigated in that way. But I'm just wondering from a legal standpoint, if you can share more.
Yeah, and
sure.
And Mr. Bosio, feel free to incorporate anything related to the process itself as you answer the question about our legal analysis in terms of the question by Board Member Garcia about our perspective on the conflict of interest claim, if you will.
Sure, Superintendent, glad to do that. So I believe the assertion that's been put out there is it's not that, as far as I understand it, that there's any board member that has a conflict of interest, or for that matter, any employee. I think the assertion that was made was that Mr. Behrens, who's a counsel that we retain from Lozano Smith to provide general counsel services, sits on as an unpaid volunteer member of the board, the nonprofit board, the Center for Fathers and Families, that has one of the agreements here to run one of the expanded learning programs. So we've analyzed that to death, and really, it's not even a close question that there's no conflict of interest present. Again, there has to be, in order for a conflict of interest, and to Superintendent's point, when we review our agreements, we have a process. That's one of the questions that my department, in-house counsel, legal services department, always would be aware of in vetting any contract. But in this situation, that just was not present. Mr. Behrens had no involvement in the making of this contract or in any way advising on this contract. He probably didn't even know about it. So in order to have a conflict of interest that's recognizable under the Government Code, Section 1090, or the Political Reform Act, first and foremost, there has to be a financial interest, material financial interest that the individual would have. And as I mentioned before, Mr. Behrens, his only connection to the center group is to sit on their board as an unpaid, volunteer member of that nonprofit entity. So one, there's no financial interest present with Mr. Behrens, and secondly, those codes, the government codes, prevent one with a financial interest in participating in making a contract. He didn't have any participation in making this contract at all. So pretty clear case that there's not any sort of prohibited conflict of interest in this matter. And I can answer any other questions that you may have to follow up on that.
I just have one follow-up question. Is this a new sort of vendor or CBO to the district, or has this CBO been delivering services to the district in prior years? Or what's the history between the CBO?
That's my understanding. I can let Manpreet can answer that question.
So I started in youth development as a substitute in 2003, October 2003. And since then, I have been hearing the name Center for Fathers and Families. I became a specialist in 2010. And since then, we have been signing contracts with Center for Fathers and Families. So this agency has been working with the district for almost, if safely I can say, 10 plus years. And they have been at different sites. Their size has shrank, expand, And right now, I think they're at four sites or 5. I can't remember at the top of my head, but they have been working for a long, long time with us.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because this has been a topic that's I've had an interest in for quite some time. So thank you.
And Member Garcia, I think you asked the question, and I'm not going to belabor this. So we can come back to this question maybe in the next round of this entire process. But the learning hubs are going through an evaluation process that's internal to us, that's being led by Mr. Harris and his team, above and beyond any evaluation capacity, if you will, from any of the CBOs, because I do think that even though we might have the resources and it's an appropriate use of those resources through the CARES Act, that it's still an important activity for us to spend some quality time trying to understand the value of the program to the students that are participating, in light of the fact that the goal here is to try to mitigate lost instruction, if you will, and they're designed to provide supplemental support to our students. And so I did think that it was important for us to dedicate some time and energy internally to an evaluation process.
And our first approach is very much focused on kind of a pre-post of looking at potentially attendance rates pre-Learning Hub, post-Learning Hub, and then doing some qualitative surveying of the adults within that process to get their reactions to the experience. So those are some of the initial ways that we're looking to understand the value proposition of Learning Hubs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to learn more about them. I think it's great that we have them. I just wanted to make sure that, once again, we always go to the CARES dollars that need to be spent by December 30th before any other dollars are used to fund efforts. So anything related, right, to the pandemic. So thank you.
Great. Okay, well, thank you to the staff, and thank you, Manpreet, for that explanation on contracts. I'm sure with the successful learning hubs, it's put a whole new layer of on your work in terms of contracts. So right now we have a motion on the table to remove the Centers for Fathers and Families contract out of the approval of the contracts. Do we have a second?
I'll go ahead and second that motion to separate that contract from the rest.
Okay. And then we need a roll call vote, Superintendent.
Yes, Member Pritchett, if I can just ask for more clarification. If with that motion, I do want to make sure that there will be a vote on a separate item, if you will, because we do need to
There's
make.
There's going to be several votes.
Okay, very good. So roll call vote. Member Pritchett.
No.
Member Minnick.
No.
Member Morawski.
No.
Member Garcia.
Aye.
Member Vang.
Yes.
Unfortunately, yes. We did
Member Wu.
a shooting
No.
that took place at our
Somebody, yeah. It is 3 no's, 2 yays.
All right, that motion has failed. So we will be taking up the additional all of the contracts at this time. So can I get a motion to approve the contracts?
I'll move it.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Student preferential vote.
Aye.
Member Pritchett.
Aye.
Member Minnick.
Aye.
Member Morawski.
Just one quick question.
Sorry, Member Morawski, we didn't hear you.
Oh, aye.
Member Garcia.
Member Garcia, we didn't hear you.
Member Garcia.
Aye.
Member Vang.
Abstain.
Member Wu.
Aye.
But they
Okay. 5 yays, 1 abstention.
Okay. Great. Thank you, staff, for that presentation. Item 6.0, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. And a
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Fantastic. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.